Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle podcast. Top of the National League. Yes, top. Let's be honest, it's not happened too many times in the past 3 years and a little bit, has it? 4 points from 2 games. Should it have been 6, with twice taking the lead against Boreham Wood, but being pegged back twice, and 1 or 2, dare I say it, old failings coming back to haunt us a little bit. Now on to the second road trip of the league season. Gateshead Tuesday night, a return for Macaulay Langstaff and Kedwin Scott to the northeast. Joining us tonight, Mark Stallard. He'll be running the rule over Langstaff and whether he can hit 20 goals this season again. But what about the other end? Are we going to be more frugal at the back, do you think? Or, only 2 games in, remember, will balls into our box still be an Achilles heel at the very, very top end level if we're judging Notts by automatic promotion status? It will be a first ever league visit to Gateshead. Giving us the lowdown later in the programme will be the Gateshead media manager, Jack McGraghan. Delighted he'll be joining us in about half an hour. Let's start the show now, though. Stell, was it 2 points thrown away on Saturday?
Yes, it was 2 points dropped. I wouldn't say thrown away, but it was certainly 2 points that they could have had and probably should have had. You could tell in the post-match interview of Luke Williams the sort of the agitation that he had. We call it a lack of concentration that they had. They were so in control for the first 30 minutes of the game. Yes, it was a bit stop-start. It was fragmented with the drinks breaks, couple of injuries, but Notts absolutely dominated possession. Didn't create loads, but they got the goal with the penalty. They had a couple of other sort of half chances. Macaulay Langstaff, maybe on another day would have been able to finish one off. But they were so in control. It was one-way traffic, and we all went down to Boreham Wood expecting a tough game. You know, Luke Garrard is always pretty well organised with his team, doesn't usually give much away, but they just dominated the ball. They were allowed time and space. They picked the passes well. One criticism that I mentioned on commentary would be when you're so on top, you've got to go and put teams to the sword and make them pay. And that's one thing they didn't do. And that did come back to bite us. But it would certainly be viewed as 2 points dropped rather than a point gained.
No names, no pack drill. But I was, I think it's fair to say, fairly reliably informed from someone, and you can probably work it out, that Boreham Wood were given instructions by Luke Garrard, long diagonal balls into the box, make the most of set pieces. That was a challenge for the club if we're judging them by the very elite level. Yeah. It wasn't just 90 minutes on Saturday, albeit against a team you would expect to be certainly top 10. And I think, as you've rightly said many times, judge a team after the first 10 and you'll have a more accurate barometer. Is it still a source of concern to you, that the ability to defend? I mean, one of the things I often bang on about, winning first headers. We don't, I'm the amateur, as Derek Pavis used to say to Neil Warnock, you're the ex-professional. Are we aerially strong enough, do you think?
Well, we weren't Saturday at times. The 2 goals come from corners. I know one's a penalty given, but again, neither got clean contact. I think the first equaliser, you could argue we did get first contact, but it was the ball allowed to drop to about shin height, knee height, about 8 yards out from goal. There was no clear dominant header on it, as there wasn't, should I say, for the penalty for the second one. So a concern. Both goals coming from corners, particularly concern in a game where, as I said, for large parts, certainly the first half hour, Boreham Wood did not have any sort of foothold, and the frustration was that after having half an hour of almost total control of the game, they seemed to have an absolute brain freeze, loss of concentration, whatever you want to call it, for about 2 minutes, whereby, if anybody's seen the highlights package that the club have put out, Boreham Wood had 3 sort of decent chances. 2, one that was the goal, One was a gilt-edged chance for Zach Brunt running from deep, where they tried to play an offside trap that was all over the shop, to be honest. There was a lad stood offside, but Zach Brunt had ran from deep. And then a chance for, half chance for Tyrone Mosh that forced Sam Slocum into the save, where he pushed over the bar, and then they scored from the resulting corner. So in the space of 2 minutes, the game had completely turned from 30 minutes of Boreham Wood not having a chance, not having a sniff of anything, and not allowing them a sniff, dominating possession, to a simple ball from the right back, diagonal ball over the top, nobody tracking a runner, nobody, attacking that ball, allowing them a chance. And it seemed like 2 minutes of chaos, and it resulted in the equaliser. And that has got, Luke Williams is fresh in the building in the summer, so it's not at his door. But that essentially, I'm sure a lot of Notts fans will look at and go, well, that's what we've been seeing for the last year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. So that is the sort of thing. And he'll have seen it there firsthand himself. He'll have had a bit of a sniff through pre-season, but he'll have seen it firsthand himself of sort of one of the major tasks that he's got to address.
And I think I would stress at this point is that we're top, and we're going to read some comments out on that. So this is not being negative in any way, shape or form. But I think we're judging Notts here by potentially winning the league. And that's the only thing we can judge a club of the stature and the size of Notts in the National League still, even allowing for Wrexham obviously spending big bucks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about winning the league. That's the target. You always set your standards to be the highest possible. And from what I've seen and what I've heard from Luke Williams, I think that's exactly what he's expecting. But also, you want to give the lads that belief that that's where they should be aiming, because they're good enough to aim there. So it's not about, any manager in the division can say, well, set your standards high, but Notts are genuinely, or should genuinely believe that they are candidates to win this division. And if they perform well enough, often enough, then there's no reason that isn't out the question. Of course, there are competitive teams in the division, and you mentioned Wrexham, but there are others as well that will be in that same bracket, same sort of quality of players. But, you have to believe and set the bar high and set your standards high. And the team that comes closest to achieving it most frequently, most repetitively, will win the league. Okay,
some comments, and I'll just pick out those that kind of relate to Saturday's game. John Parr says that old Achilles heel for Notts, but a lot of positives to take from the game. Nathan Chambers thought it was a good point against a very well organised team, and even better if we back it up with 3 tomorrow. Think we need a new keeper though. Ball to feet with Slocum is making me nervous. Let's just have a look at 1 or 2 other comments. Paul Hawksworth, Stell, always love your comments. You sounded quite frustrated Saturday. Evening All says Ian Birchinall and several others. Chris Gosling, if Luke wasn't happy with the performance, then it's okay for us fans to be frustrated too. You are spot on, Paul. Our sights and standards should be set for first place. That's a few comments from Saturday. Right, let's just clear a few things up, because you've kind of been in the news, Stel, without being in the news, if that doesn't sound a little bit strange. So one of the questions that's come in from Jim Airy, I'm not sure whether you've able with your technological brain been able to fathom out the comments and you can see them now, or whether this all comes completely new to you. Right, okay. So Jim Airy says, is Charlie Slater back tomorrow? What's going on there?
Yes, Charlie's back tomorrow. What's going on is he got assigned a 5 Live game at the weekend, but he's back tomorrow. Dave Bracegirdle stepped in. I think what also is happening, I think there's one or two missing in the studio, I think, at the BBC. Not that I, work at the BBC, but yeah, I think there's 1 or 2 missing, with it being summer holidays and kids' holidays and things like that. So they are very, very short-handed. But that's not to say, Dave, is a fine commentator. I know Dave very well, and I thought he did an excellent job. Although I am aware that people weren't happy with him calling us county, which
I did. Yeah, I heard that. I picked up on that.
But he stood corrected at half time. We pointed it, got it pointed out, and I thought he did a good job standing in for Charlie. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm guessing someone from the club must have picked him up because he called the kit purple, and then a little bit later he referred to it by the lavender. So
lavender, yeah, yeah. Well, like I say, that's a summer kit, isn't it? If ever I've seen a colour for a summer kit, that was it. And we had the weather for it on Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think let's just go. Look, we don't duck anything on here, and we'll always call it as we see it. So James Moore, evening Paul and Stel. Hope you're both well. Yes. Just to mention the petition that's running on Radio Nottingham Sport, moving our games to online only when Forest and the Stags are playing. We've been running for a week and have over 700 signatures. To sign the petition, please go to, and if you look on the messaging on our site, you will be able to see. Look, clearly it's difficult for you, Stel. You are engaged on a freelance basis by the BBC. I think it has, and I'm hoping to have someone officially from the BBC either on Thursday's show. We'll have a Thursday show ahead of Chesterfield, or Monday's show next week, at which I'd like someone from the BBC, because people in the media often hold many organisations to account for the way they conduct their PR, right? So I'd like to think there will be an official from the BBC that will come on this show, given a fair, balanced hearing by our listeners, and go through the decision-making process about it. I think it's fair to say, though, Stel, it has sparked quite a bit of debate among Notts fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you say it's difficult. It's not difficult for me. I agree. I'd sign the petition myself. Well, I would, but again, the other side of the coin is somebody at the BBC, and like I say, I don't work for the BBC other than turn up at the games and spout my waffle. They've obviously decided that for whatever reason that, Forest need to be on. And again, the problem only comes, I think they said it 3 times in 24 games when all 3 teams kick off at the same time. But even so, first game, my dad usually listens. He's in Derby. He hasn't got a smartphone. He hasn't got the internet. Hasn't got a computer or anything like that. So he didn't listen, And I'm sure there's loads of people. I spoke to a lot of people a few people on Saturday, who sort of said the same thing. And it's certainly less than ideal, but it's not very good. So certainly from a Notts perspective, we've got a Notts hats on, but with a sort of level-headed, listening to somebody's reasoning behind the decision making, then I'm sure it's not been done just purely to spite Notts. So I absolutely not a good decision at all from my personal point of view. But hey, I have nothing to do with it. But yeah, not great. No. And if I could find that petition, I would put my name to it. So not a problem.
There you go. James Moore, you get another one on the petition, James. Yeah. And I'll read out the rest of James' comments for the sake of just going through them. I find the whole thing, moving Notts off Radio Nottingham, a real insult to the club. What would Colin Slater, RIP, have to say about this if he was still with us? I'm really disappointed with their decision. I can't understand their motive. Notts has a bigger and broader fan base than Mansfield, regardless of league position. Notts is a bigger view account for them. I really don't understand it. On that, and I absolutely agree with everything that's being said. The only thing where I slightly struggle a little bit, I probably am a bit prehistoric. So I would remember back to 30, 40 years ago, Notts were closer to Forest than they are now, but with a much smaller fan base. Notts would get equal coverage, front page. The Football Post, for instance, when we used to, Derby would have been the green, and I think it was. When Notts were at home, they were always on the front, of the Football Post. When Forest at home, they were always on the front. If you were to use the analysis or the comparison of supporter base, Forest is clearly fairly significantly larger than Notts. But in those days, it wasn't kind of done on audience. It was done on the standard at which you play at. And I understand where Radio Nottingham come from in respect of Mansfield play at a higher level. And one of the challenges that we have is that, unfortunately, we're in the National League. And rest assured, if in the next 10 years we can get into the Premier League, Forest can be in the Championship, right? All Notts fans would expect us to have more coverage than Forest, right? Because we're playing in a higher standard, even though Forest would probably have a broader fan base. So part of me doesn't quite get that argument with Mansfield coming online and playing a division higher, you know? But nevertheless, I would have thought there would have been a way for the BBC to protect Notts and the historical significance the club and the radio station have. But look, let's hear, I hope, in the very near future from the BBC to explain the whole decision-making process. Right. We got plenty of other comments. Chris Gosling, one of our most regular viewers and listeners. Evening. Question for Stell. If you're only allowed to make one more signing this season, which position would you recruit for based on opening 2 games?
Oh, that's a good question. And let me have a think. What now then? Well, I always look at the top end of the pitch, the attacking part of the pitch. I mean, we could talk about, goalkeeper. We could talk about defenders. We could talk about, a right wing back. I'm sure we might mention that with Joel Taylor having to play on the right, not his preferred position. Everyone could make a case for every position on the pitch. But if I was looking, and again, based on 2 games, so it's based on next to nothing at this moment in time, I would like, very easy, I'd just like a Cal Roberts replacement, like-for-like replacement, somebody who can beat a player, be creative, but also weigh in with some goals. And that might well turn out to be Sam Austin. It might turn out to be Kedwin Scott. We've seen very little of them. But I just think at what's gone out, in terms of the important players, it's like somebody who can score goals. We've lost a lot of goals with Kyle Wootton and Cal going. Now, we hope we found the replacements and they're already in the building. But on 2 games, that's the bit. You can never have too many players who can score a goal.
Okay, good answer. Which kind of leads me on to one of the questions. Macaulay Langstaff. Okay, so strikers union and all that. Not a massively dissimilar build to you. One of the things that surprised me or was very interesting when Macaulay did the interview with us, which the club organised, and Macaulay spoke very well. He said he's been handed, although he got all those goals for Gateshead last year, he's been handed a different striking role. He's been empowered by Luke Williams in a different way to the way Mike Williamson managed him or treated him and the role he was asked to play. At Gateshead, he kind of played wide and would cut in, score his goals. At Notts, he's been told to be more central, more sniffing out goals in the box and kind of stay in the central third furrow or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. What's your take on Macaulay? And while you're talking, because my point to you is, can he get 20 goals? How many goals? So stick fingers on digits. How many goals do you think Macaulay will get for us this season? So far away now, while Stell gives us an answer to that. So a critique of Macaulay Langstaff and what you think he can do and how many he can get.
Well, first impressions very good. Obviously, the Maidenhead game was a dream debut for him. But I always try and look at players beyond the headline bits. I'm not too blown away by, of course, we want goals, of course, we want assists, but I look at a player's all-round game. What's he doing for the, like I used to do, for 89 minutes as a striker, you're generally not involved. Well, that's the case. Now, he wasn't involved as much on Saturday as he was against Maidenhead. Maidenhead, he gets his 2 goals, gets all the headlines. Saturday doesn't really get too much of a sniff. Couple of half chances, one decent chance that, the defenders took his eye away from the ball in the first half. But other than that, didn't really, Notts didn't find a way of getting him into the game as much. So you're going to get that. Of course you are. And again, I'm trying trying to give a critique of seeing him over, 2 games. So, but what I saw in the Maidenhead game, take the goals out of it, which were fantastic. That's a separate issue. But I saw somebody who was on the move. Again, don't know how he used to play at Gateshead. Don't know what Mike Williamson wanted him to do as his Gateshead manager. But he looked busy, and he was trying to make little runs in the channels. Rather than, you say, he used to play out wide and cut inside, now he can start centrally and just look to pull off into spaces between centre halves, between the centre half and the fullback. And that really is where he got his goals from against Maidenhead. That for the first goal particularly, just a little spinning run, good play by Ruben and Jim. But that's what good strikers, if you're an out-and-out goal scorer, that's what good strikers can do. Don't get involved in the build-up. Don't get too caught up in coming and showing to feet, always showing up for the ball. He says, Ruben's the playmaker, creative player, alongside Jim, alongside Sam Austin. Let them go and work a bit of space. But then when you see the ball coming, when you see it, a couple of seconds, maybe not even that, but when they get into that space, the position between the midfield and the defenders, and it looks like you've got a bit of time to pick a pass, as Ruben did for the first goal, that's when you spin and make your run. And it's timing, it's things like that. And he seemed to have it. And there were plenty of times you'll do it. 99% of the time you'll do it and the ball won't come. There'll be a misplaced pass, there'll be a tackle, it'll be overhit, whatever happened. That was more of the case on Saturday. I thought some of the delivery from back to front was not great. So he didn't get in the game too much. But I think from what I've seen, he will score goals, we'll create him chances because, as in both the games, we will dominate possession against most teams this season. We'll have the ball for a lot of the time. And I think, we certainly need to use it a little bit better, a little bit more carefully in the final third than maybe we did on Saturday. But he'll score goals. If he stays fit, obviously, he will score goals. I've got no question from what I've seen on 2 games. But again, I don't want to put the kibosh on him. Don't want to put any extra pressure on him either, because it's down to others to sort of help create for him as well.
Okay, Ian Birchnell says Macaulay will get 30. Paul Huskerson, 25. John Parr, 22. Maggie Grant, 27. James Moore. Langstaff should bag 20 plus with ease in this team. He was 14-1 to be the league's top scorer, which I thought was a steal. Get a few quid on him before those odds drop. Duncan Comrie, if he gets a good run with no knocks, I think 25. James Moore adds, Wootton always brought the rest of the team into the game and was more a target link man. Langstaff looks like he's got quick feet and gets into the right positions. Far more of a poacher. Chris Gosling, if you use him away from home like we did Saturday, then I think you'll get a similar amount to Wootton. After that first half hour, we kept hitting early long balls to him against big, tough defenders. James Moore adds, I'd really like to see us play Langstaff and Scott and play 2 up front, more of a 4-4-2 to see what we can really do. Yeah, that kind of leads me on to the second part of a associated topic, Stel. Always used to be said, strikers hunt in pairs, didn't it? And one of the more modern phenomena, certainly over the last 10 years, maybe even 15 years now, is you don't necessarily have partnerships like you used to. So last year, there was clearly a strong partnership with our 2 new signings from Gateshead, Kedwin Scott and Macaulay Langstaff. And between them, they're hitting 50 goals, whatever it is. Now, and I believe several people have asked me and posted messages today in terms of Kedwin Scott. And I believe that he wasn't able to get a full pre-season under his belt to the satisfaction of the club, bit of illness early on. And so they're still bringing him up, if you like, to full speed. Now, do you foresee, once Kedwin is deemed fully match fit, that they would operate as a partnership, as a front 2, Stel? Because it's not always easy when we then throw the Ruben Rodriguez role into the mix. And I think it's fair to say that both Neil didn't play Ruben much, did he? But Ian didn't necessarily play with 2 up front much with Rodriguez in the team. So that's an interesting one. What do you think?
Yeah, well, my initial thoughts on what we've seen in the first two games is no, I don't think he would play a two up front. Now, all managers, all coaches are adaptable these days. They can change based on the personnel, form, fitness, injuries, suspensions, all that sort of thing. So it will be changeable. It's not, one size fits all. But I don't think playing two up front is not massively popular in the modern game.
No.
It's not just a Notts phenomenon. It's all over the place. Basically, players are fitter, so they're asked to do sort of dual roles, if you like. Roles evolve, and the days of big man, tall man striking partnerships, I'll say they're gone, but they're not so prevalent now. It's a lot about, can you play a number 10? Can you play players in them little tucked in positions coming off,
Yeah.
not out wide, but in the little pockets of space that we always talk about and hear about, that are difficult to mark. And so the game always evolves. I was speaking today earlier with Charlie actually about, you look at Liverpool and Man City, the two biggest and best footballing teams in the country. And this summer they've gone and bought top quality, but big, physical, powerful centre forwards. Not your little floaty number 10 roles. And now they've already got players like that in abundance, but then maybe are we going to see the game evolve again? In terms of, right, well, all this passing football is great, but anybody who watched any of the Premier League games at the weekend will see there's still quite a few long balls involved,
Yeah.
quality
Yes.
long balls, but it goes from back to front quite regularly. So the game always evolves. Do I see, to bring it back to Notts, do I see
Yeah.
Kedwin Scott coming in and being a partnership with Macaulay Langstaff? Quite possibly, but I don't see him coming in and being a front two. I see him coming in and maybe playing in sort of the role Sam Austin's played in the first two games, So I think there's going to be, say, a bit of rotation. It might be, and I've not seen Kedwin Scott play other than his little cameo 15 minutes against Maidenhead, from which you can't really tell anything. But it may be that Kedwin Scott will play as the lone forward, and then, as he did when Cairo Mitchell came on Saturday, that Macaulay Langstaff plays slightly in behind him, in a slightly deeper role from there. So there's options with all the players, and Cairo Mitchell with his goal is another name to throw into the mix. So there are options there. Like I say, we can't make judgment on players based on having seen them for a few minutes or whatever.
Of course.
But in terms of a front two, not without us getting injuries. I don't see that.
It's interesting, and I inadvertently had not seen Adi Clark, friend of the show. He was actually asking the question that I put to you, but I hadn't seen it. So Adi had asked, "Great to have you both back. What's your thoughts on Langstaff and Scott yet to play together? This was a proven strike partnership last season, and it's something we may well pick up on with Jack from Gateshead when he joins us in not too distant future about how those two dovetailed for Gateshead, because it may well be a different way that Luke is expecting those two signings to play for us. Chris Gosling, I think we need to play a prop up front too. Zedo says Langstaff and Ruben, if we keep him until end of season, 45 goals between them. No pressure there, lads. Zedo, echoing your thoughts from earlier, Mark, still think we need another striker. Would like a big physical option, may also help defensively for set pieces. James Moore, Ruben is the first name on the team sheet with his more number 10/8 attacking midfield role. It's going to be hard to get a strike partnership up front going. Absolutely. Interesting. Paul Huskisson, and get your thoughts on this, Stel. Very valid point. No one has mentioned Cairo Mitchell. He played well when he came on last Saturday and he got an exceptional goal. As a striker that's been through one or two barren runs, albeit not so many knots,
and the rest, yeah.
What can that do for Cairo Mitchell?
Oh, it can give him the world of good. Give him plenty of confidence. A new manager coming in is generally a chance for a fresh start for anybody. I think Cairo Mitchell will be the first to say last season didn't go anything like he would have hoped it to, and he would have wanted it to. But a new manager comes in, fresh start. You've got a chance pre-season to impress, and as ever, and I will always say this. Might not have always felt it during my career, but I will always say this: that you've got your destiny in your own hands to a massive extent. very rarely, it does happen, but very, very rarely, the managers come in with preconceived ideas that, no, you can't play. If you do well in they might have preferences and they might have an idea of the makeup of the team and the personnel that's going to be in it. But every game you get, whether that's pre-season friendlies, training sessions, or a league game, cup game, every game you get, you've got a chance to push your case. And I say it all the time on commentary, when you get a shirt, you have to use that. Now, of course, there are times when, in the old days with the reserve leagues and things like that, where it didn't matter what you did sometimes because the first team were doing well and nobody was going to get dropped because of it. But, you know, when a new manager comes in, it's a clean slate and you've got a chance. And Cairo Mitchell, like I say, will be full of confidence. He very nearly scored a brilliant second that would have won us the game. He bent one just past the post at 2-2. But, you know, hopefully that gives him the confidence, the belief. You know, the manager will put his trust in him. The fact that, you know, he brought him on. He's brought him on and put him up top, you know, and kept Macaulay Langstaff in behind him, thought he needed his physical presence. He obviously sees him as somebody that he's willing to trust and put on the pitch. And when you're on the pitch, if you score goals like you did Saturday, you do your case, no harm whatsoever.
Very good. And apologies, I was listening there, but I think Jack's having a few problems joining the show. So I was trying to multitask there and resend the link. I'm just mightily relieved we haven't got any echoes after a couple of weeks ago. Chris Gosling, Mitchell changed the dynamic for us Saturday, so fair play to him. Got us back competing in the game. Ian Birchnell, I hope Cairo proves me wrong, but I don't think he is a consistent threat for us. Dylan Room, Ian, I think he can be what Eli was last season. Here's one you've not heard before in the same sentence. Cairo Mitchell and Divock Origi. There you go.
Wow. Okay, if he scores the winner in the Champions League at some point, that'll be some career.
Hey. Right. Joining us on cue. Right, I'm going to say Jack because I did not have the chance to check how we pronounce your surname, Jack, and I don't want to insult you by pronouncing it wrong. So how do we pronounce your surname, young man?
It's McGraghan.
Oh, there's a good northeast accent.
No one says it right.
Oh. What's the crest on the wall behind you?
Oh, yeah, I'm a Sunderland fan, unfortunately.
I was thinking, I don't think that's Gateshead. I don't think that's Gateshead. So you're obviously too young to remember Lee Hughes belting one in and us knocking you out the FA Cup about 10 years ago.
I did, when I was Googling to see whether Gateshead had ever played, and I came across the FA Cup game, I had looked to see who else he's had played that year. And I literally can't remember that game at all. For some reason, but
it's indelibly etched because, to be honest with you, since then it's gone pretty much downhill. Right, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. So we're talking, and we'll come on to sort of background for the game and all that. We've been talking strikers, and we've been chatting about Macaulay. I'm not sure whether you saw we did a big 45-minute interview with him. He spoke very well. And we've also been talking about Cedwyn Scott. We've not seen much of Cedwyn because a bit of illness. So he's been limited to sort of 10, 15-minute cameos. Tell us a bit about those two, the characters and what they did for you last year.
I think, obviously, you're saying there he's not played too much. Cedwyn, I think I'd heard he'd been a bit ill, so I hadn't really played much in pre-season or anything. But from what I'd seen, Macca had been doing quite well for years in pre-season, so he's pretty much carried on from where he left off last year, really.
Like as people, you obviously as media manager, press of it, you get to deal with them one-on-one. What were they like as people?
I think when the pair of them are together, they're wind-up merchants, shall we say. But yeah, it's, to be fair, everyone around the club last season was very similar. It was always like quite a positive place to come into, and like the pair of them were no different, really. Obviously, it helps when, you know, they're doing well, playing every week, scoring a lot of goals, so it makes their mood coming in a little bit better. But, you know, they're two people that were very good to have around the place, and I imagine they'll be very much the same at Notts County at the minute. What
sort of reception will they get tomorrow?
I'd be very, very surprised if it was anything negative. I'm only expecting a positive reception, to be fair, from our fans, because I know when they both left, our fans were pretty gutted. Obviously, especially first Macaulay went and then Kedron went straight after. So I think especially they were a bit gutted that they both ended up going to the same team a bit. But yeah, I'm very much expecting a positive reaction for the pair of them tomorrow night.
Having got promotion, were you bracing yourself to lose those two or not? Or had you hoped, having gone up a division, you might be able to hold on to them? Because clearly the manager stayed, and I guess possibly he's the single most important ingredient you've got in the success story that you've got going there at the moment.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I think you always kind of expected, given how well we'd done last year, that there was going to be a fair bit of interest for the pair of them. I think even during the season last year, they signed, like, the pair of them signed new contracts like halfway through the season because there was a bit of interest from elsewhere to kind of keep them at the club for the rest of the season at least, so we didn't lose them halfway through. So I think it was always a bit of a, maybe not an expectation, but I think a lot of us kind of thought, you know, there are going to be clubs interested, like probably bigger clubs than us and in higher leagues perhaps. So I wasn't massively surprised when they ended up leaving, to be fair. But it wasn't a case of that they were both desperate to leave and sort of looking for a way out. It just so happens that, you know, opportunities come at clubs that can help kind of progress their careers and that type of thing. But I don't think it was ever a case of that, you know, season finished and they were like, right, we need to leave type of thing.
Okay. There are some links between ourselves and Gateshead. Adam Campbell. Now, Adam was here for a few years with us at Notts in the Football League. Dylan Room asks, your thoughts on Adam, Jack? Seen he started very well. Feel like he never worked. If it didn't quite work for him as much as he would have wanted at the Notts side he was in. Been an important player for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I'm not sure how long ago exactly it was when he was at Notts, but I imagine he was probably quite young when he was with Hughes. Because to be fair, he's still not really that old now. He's only like mid-20s-ish, to be fair. So, but yeah, he's obviously played both the games at the start of this season. I mean, last season when he first signed, it maybe took him a little while to score his first goal, I think. So there was a few fans who were a bit like skeptical on him. But then as soon as he got one, I think he ended up finishing on like 12 in the league. And it's not necessarily just like goals wise. He does a lot of running off the ball and puts a lot of pressure on defenses when they've got the ball and plays quite a big part in the build up, dropping deep and things like that. So I think he played a lot last season in like the front three when you had Macaulay and Kedron up there as well. And I think they wouldn't have scored as many perhaps if Adam wasn't playing there as well. But he's definitely one that our fans are fond of now, even if they maybe weren't at the start of it.
Another connection, obviously. We've had two come down from you. You've got one going the other direction, Lewis Knight. Lewis was very unlucky. We sponsored him actually on the podcast, among others, and very unlucky with injury. Suffered a really bad hamstring right at the start of last season, and didn't really get back in. Went a bit out on loan. Is he into first team reckoning yet? Is he still rehabbing? How's he getting on?
So I think you say he's been a bit unlucky with Hughes. Is kind of carried through a bit. Maybe I think maybe in like the first week of pre-season, perhaps. I think I wasn't actually at the training session he did it at, but from what I've heard, I think he like went to put a cross in or went to have a shot and ended up doing something to his hip. So he's injured at the minute, and I think it's like probably going to be a couple of months, few months by the sounds of it that he's out for. So it's not great from his point of view. It must be a bit frustrating that, you know, because he was in Bradford's team and playing fairly regular back end of last season without any problems. So he's just been a bit unlucky again in that sense, really. So yeah, he's out for a couple of months or so.
You obviously know Mike Williamson better than most. We have it on good authority. He's good friends with a former Notts player, Shola Amiobi, and clearly you've got strong links with that relationship with Newcastle. And without going into too much detail, I know that we were, let's use a journalistic euphemism and say we were running the rule over him quite closely. Let's just leave it at that, because I don't think much of it got into the media, but we were anyway. And he stayed loyal to Gateshead. What's he like as a manager? How important is he to what you're trying to achieve there?
From my point of view, I'd say like a very big part, but it's not. I mean, he'll say it himself in interviews and everything. It's all like a collective effort from, say, him and the assistant and the coaching staff that's got as well, obviously, someone who I think when I was researching played a few games for yourself on loan years ago was Rob Elliott, who used to play for
Yeah.
Newcastle in goal. He's just come on board as like a technical director as well.
I
So
saw that. Stel, did he cross over with you?
No, I'm earlier than that.
Or not? You was very close. I think you must have only left a few months before he came on loan.
Possibly, yeah. No, we didn't cross over. No.
Yeah, so yeah, because that's an interesting appointment, and I guess indicative of how you're stepping up and having a very much a full-time philosophy in this league. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in terms of the full-time aspect, I think Gateshead's been full-time since maybe, I think like a couple of years after they got promoted to the National League, like the first time, well, not the first time around, but like 10 years ago or so. So I think we've probably been full-time about like 11 or 12 years, something like that, but stayed that way after we got demoted. And yeah, to be fair, I think I obviously mentioned Rob there. He's kind of been helping around the place the last like couple of years after he got released by Newcastle. I think it's an environment that, so obviously he said himself really that he just enjoyed coming into and enjoyed helping around the place. And that's, I think, a bit of a culture that sort of the coaching staff and obviously like Mike himself likes to put in around the place, and then that extends through to the players and everything like that. I mean, if you did an interview with Macaulay, if you asked anything about Mike to him, I imagine he probably mentioned that he's quite big on like mindset and the psychology side of things and all that type of stuff. So he's probably different to the stereotypical footballer, if you want to call it that. Obviously, still playing as well, technically. So
there was some Japanese philosophies into. I read an article that he was talking about, and he sort of studied that and used that to adapt, like you say, the mindset and the mental aspect of managing and coaching footballers.
Yeah, he reads quite a lot of books. A lot of them go over my head. I'm not really big into that stuff, so I'm not going to pretend to know what it's all about exactly. But yeah, it's been probably like a slower process in terms of implementing that like across the club and through. But I think like last season you saw it in kind of like full flow really, where all the players had bought into it, and it was a thing that helped the club get a bit of success, because obviously the first couple, like this is his fourth, I think, season as manager. Obviously the first couple just got cancelled because of COVID really, so it was a bit of a strange one. So like technically last season winning the league was his first actual full season as manager really.
He's done very well. Now then, it's a new stadium for us, which means you will be guaranteed, despite it being midweek, despite it the heavens opening, if you look at the weather forecast, you'll have a big contingent of Notts fans. I think it's something like the 139th ground I've seen Notts play at in league fixtures. It's when you bounce around all the divisions, you can clock the grounds up. What can we expect from the stadium? And is Stell, who is Notts County's 7th all-time leading goal scorer, and be with the BBC Radio Nottingham commentary team tomorrow with Charlie Slater. Has he got nice padded seats and a heated press box, or does he need to bring his sou'wester?
Well, there is an indoor press box, so if it's freezing, you've got that at least. So you're not sat outside braving the elements as much necessarily, which, to be fair, in the winter, being indoor helps a bit. But in terms of the stadium itself, obviously, whenever anyone talks about the stadium, they always point out the running track and the fact it's an athletics ground and all that. So like the away fans will be in the stand like opposite the side where the tunnel is, so they'll probably feel quite far away from the home fans, at least anyway. But to be fair, it's like everyone always says that you feel as if you're miles away from the game and that type of thing, but I've never really quite understood that as much. I mean, I can see it from an atmosphere point of view, possibly because there's like a couple of empty stands to either side and that type of thing, and you're not as close as you are maybe at other non-league grounds. But some people use the example of Newcastle. If you're in the away at Newcastle, you're kind of up in the gods, miles away from the pitch a bit. So in terms of the view, I think it's made out to be worse than it actually is. But the away stand is uncovered though, so if it's raining tomorrow, it might get a bit wet.
Right, pack your Macs tomorrow. Now, you can just pay on the night. Do you go to the turnstiles? Do you go to the ticket office to buy your ticket? What's the pack drill for tomorrow night?
So you can either buy them online through the website, and then if you buy them online, you can basically either show on your phone, you get like an email confirmation. You can either just show that on your phone or you can print it out and bring it. And then for paying on the gate, you just pay at the turnstile pretty much. So you just go to like the east to get to the east stand. You just have to go up sort of like a path that's just to the right of the stadium. It leads you up around the back of there, and then they'll be able to pay on the turnstiles. But yeah, we sell like most of our tickets on the gate really, as opposed to online.
Yeah, and a few of us that haven't got anything better to do on Wednesday morning, i.e. work, i.e. me, will be stopping at cheap travel lodges in the centre of Newcastle for 40 quid. And there's a metro, and the metro runs, there's a metro stop from Newcastle city centre, very close to the ground, correct?
Yeah. So the metro stop is literally just called Gateshead Stadium. It's about like a few minutes walk away from the ground. You pretty much just come off there and walk through like a housing estate basically, and it just brings you out by this big Asda, and the stadium's right across the road pretty much.
Okay. Jack, conscious of your time, so thank you ever so much indeed for joining us. Make sure Stell's well looked after. He likes his creature comforts now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Keep us one of them seats in the indoor bit, Jack, please. Just tipping it there.
It might be a bit of a wet one by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think it might be, but we should all be there. Jack, thank you ever so much indeed. I'll let you get on and with whatever duties you need to be getting on with. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And after tomorrow night, we of course wish you all the very, very best in establishing yourself back again in the top flight of the National League.
Cheers, Norris. Thanks for having us. A safe trip up tomorrow, and I'm sure I'll see you there.
Thank you very much indeed, Jack. Take care.
Jack.
Cheers. See you later on.
Okay, Stell. Yeah, so I'm going to get wet tomorrow, aren't I?
Yeah, I think a few of us will. Yeah, going by the forecast.
Oh dear me. Okay, let's get back on to Notts. Right, I've lost my train of thought now. Right, I think it's been a surprise. Joel Taylor, left-footed. Dropped in at right back or right wing back for the first two games. We've obviously got options on the right side, but we're going with a left-sided player. Do you think that's a purely temporary thing? We hear a lot about inverted wingers. You know, is Luke going to be pioneering inverted wing backs?
Well, not judging by the fact that Adam Chickson's on the left-hand side, a left footer on that side. I think it's. Well, so whether it's temporary, again, comes down to Joel Taylor, how he plays. He's done all right in them positions early stages. I thought Adam Chickson was particularly good in the first half on Saturday. And I think he's been, a revelation, really, Adam Chickson, over the last 18 months. So credit to him. I think, well, you would like to think that with all the data, all the stuff that goes into it, I would like to think that maybe Joel Taylor wasn't earmarked right at the start of the season to be our right wing back permanently throughout the season. Again, if he plays well, then the ball is in his court, of course. But no, I'd like to think that's probably more a case of circumstances. And remember, the first signing we made in the summer, wasn't it? I think it was Toby Adebayo Rolling.
Yes.
From Ebbsfleet, who apparently can play that position. Now, obviously not seen him in the 16, so don't quite know where he's at. But I say it's the manager, whoever it be, the head coach Luke Williams now always picks the best people that they think for the role. So whether that's a left footer playing as a right wing back, left footer playing as a left wing back, then they're who he deems to be the best people at this moment in time to play them positions. Now again, we might have a few players who are getting up to speed, maybe didn't have a full pre-season, or maybe they've come in and had a look at it, and because they've come from lower leagues, maybe the coaches had a look at it and go, well, I just maybe need you to improve one or two things. You just don't know. But at this moment in time, I think Joel Taylor's done well. He started the season well. Is he a long-term going to do 46 games at right wing back? I don't think that was the plan, but again, it's down to him.
There's always been, I think, given the way that we've set up in terms of a style of play and playing it out from the back, there's always been a debate about the type of goalkeeper you need. So once upon a time, you just needed a goalkeeper that stopped the ball going in the net. That was kind of just the primary requirement. Kicking ability comes into it a lot more now. The ability basically to have outfield skills to move the ball around. And I'm sure when Sam Slocum was 18, that wasn't the way goalkeepers were taught. And they're kind of two camps, aren't there? You know, Sam is a vastly experienced keeper, organisers, steady, yeah. And there are some saying, well, he doesn't necessarily have the dynamic, for instance, of a Patterson, yeah, who's currently now in the first team in the Championship for Sunderland. What's your take on the goalkeeping situation?
Well, what you said, you're right. You're absolutely right. A goalkeeper's role now is far different to what it was 10, 15 years ago, let alone 20 odd years ago. They do have to be adept with their feet because they receive the ball that often. They're the pivot at the back. They're the spare man at all times when you want to keep possession, when you want to go from right to left and vice versa. You always got your keeper available to you. And at times, for the first half hour, there was not a problem. But, and like anything, goalkeepers and their distribution get spotlighted dependent on how the team is doing.
Yeah.
So for the first half hour, Sam Slocum didn't put a foot wrong, like neither did Kyle Cameron, neither did Aidan Baldwin, neither did Richard Brinley and any of the Notts players, because we passed the ball well, we kept the ball, we weren't particularly wasteful with it, we dominated possession. Then we had that 2-minute spell where chaos ensued, they get their equaliser, and I don't think for any sustained period of the game after that, we really regained the composure that we had in that opening half hour. The second half, Sam Slocum was shaky at on one or two occasions at least with the ball at his feet, but so were Aidan Baldwin and Kyle Cameron, and there were some misplaced passes, Ed Francis as well, in terms of retaining the ball. We didn't have the slickness, the fluidity that we had in that opening half hour. And it only takes fractions again. So your defender rolls the ball to the midfield player, and it's just slightly bobbling up for him, or it's or he plays it back to the opposite defender, and it's just slightly the wrong side of him, or on his wrong foot, and then he has to give a slightly ropey pass, and it ends up back with the keeper on his wrong foot. Now, we got out of jail twice on Saturday with 2 disallowed goals. Rightly disallowed for offside. I mean, I had no sort of view for it, but the linesman's flag went up. That'll do for me. But one of them particularly came from Notts, for want of a better phrase, trying to play out from the back, but not doing it with anything like the care and the quality that's required. And I think it ended up with a hurried ball back to Sam on his left foot, less favoured, and he hits it all along the ground, straight to the Boreham Wood midfield player. He plays it forward. Zach Brunt puts it in, but thankfully Zach Brunt, who was closing down, had come from an offside position, so it got disallowed. But Notts in general, not just Sam, looked less convincing with the ball in the second half on Saturday than they did to the first. So in terms of goalkeeper, we said it when Nathan Patterson came in, he was far better with the ball at his feet. I think that's a particular strength. But you look at that, he's now playing regularly in the Championship for Sunderland. So Sam Slocum, as you said, is a goalkeeper from a bygone era. He certainly isn't. But when he was 18, he wouldn't have had that much time with the ball at his feet. He's spending more time with the ball at his feet now than he ever will have in his career. And it's down to him to make the improvements and the necessary adjustments because of that. But also, it doesn't just... Sometimes with the final ball is not the only culprit. It can be a build-up of poor passes, poorly placed passes, poor weight of pass. But I would agree. Second half, particularly, his kicking wasn't brilliant, and nor would I say was not retention of the ball, for large spells in the second half.
Chris Gosling says, I do feel for Sam. We're asking a 30-plus-year-old goalkeeper to do something alien to him. The young keepers are brought up nowadays with this new keeper mentality. And then there's a lot of debate on the message board of the show, Stel, about Tiernan Brooks, who I think and clearly these are pre-season games, but when you've seen him, he looks, let's put it this way, to stand a chance. to stand a chance. We've had a succession of loan keepers brought in that started ahead of Sam. I guess as it stands, Tiernan Brooks is our number 2 keeper because we haven't moved into the loan market for a goalkeeper. I mean, I don't know whether you've seen much of Tiernan, Stell.
No.
He's got a chance, and I guess it can make or break a keeper of 19, 20 years old to sling him into the first team, drop a ricket, sets them back a year. Conversely, if he doesn't get at a fairly senior level match experience, it's debatable how much he can improve playing for Colville, Worksop, whatever. And that's no disrespect to them.
No, you're right. But what I would say is you have to earn the right to get them senior games, and you earn that in training and the games that you are given. And I certainly, I've not seen a lot of Tiernan Brooks other than him warming up in games and you know, the odd couple of occasions we've seen him. So I don't know anything about his goalkeeping ability in terms of being able to come into the league. But what I would go back to is no manager picks, you know, anything less than what they deem to be the best players in certain positions. And you go back to the previous manager, Ian Birchnell, as you say, Sam Slocum started the season as number 1, but he went out and got a keeper in Anthony Patterson, who came in and usurped him and was in the starting lineup, and Sam had to make do with being the backup keeper. He goes, Vyacheslav Yaros comes in, and for a time, Yaros is the number 1 keeper, but eventually, over a period of 7, 8, 9 games, whatever it was, Sam Slocum was the number 1 keeper again. Now, that is based on, obviously, whoever's in the goal, the performances in the games, training, you know, from week to week, from Monday to Friday, training week in, week out, having a look, assessing the skills. And it might not be him, it'd be the goalkeeper coach as well. So conversely, the fact that Sam Slocum was number 1 for large chunks other than when Patterson was here, he was droppable under Ian Birchnell, but at no point did Ian Birchnell put Tiernan Brooks in. He sent him out on loan to get experience, to taste men's football, to probably to strengthen himself, to get a bit of confidence in playing in physical and competitive football. And so far with Luke Williams in, he's not seen enough to warrant Sam Slocum coming out and Tiernan Brooks going in. So that to me tells me that no, Sam is the number 1 keeper at the minute, and you know, Tiernan Brooks, as promising as he may be, and he's got a whole career ahead of him at his age in terms of goalkeeping. He's still got to make that step up, and when he does get a chance, assuming he does get a chance at some point, then like everybody else, it's down to him to take it.
James Mortars, I think Sam gets a hard press. He's been a good keeper for us. Last season, he was in and out all the time. I think we're missing a big, mouthy, nasty defender like a Gary Strodder to shore things up. That's kind of getting back to the discussion we had at the start of the season, at the start of the programme, with the person that is, if you like, totally aerially dominant. But I think the trade-off then, certainly when I had this conversation with Ian Birchnell, was they want defenders to be able to be comfortable on the ball. And if anyone out there knows a ball-playing central defender, the chances are he's playing significantly higher than in the National League. Yes, Stel?
If they can defend as well, yeah, absolutely. But again, you can only go into the market of players at the ability level or willing to play at the level you play at.
Yeah.
You know, we all want, you know, creative players who can score 15 to 20 a season, as well as creating 15 to 20, and defenders who can defend like Van Dijk, but play a ball like Glenn Hoddle, or, you know, players like that. You know, you have to cut your cloth accordingly. And you know, I think Notts in terms of ball playing defenders are pretty good. And like we kicked off the show with, I think it's that defensive side of the defending that, as a team, has been an Achilles heel for a while, and on Saturday, set pieces again, just a little bit of a problem. So again, it's marrying the two. It's marrying ball playing defenders, because that's the way you want to set up and keep the possession of the ball, with defenders who are good enough to defend when the game gets a bit chaotic and stretched.
James Moore says his name's Kyle Cameron, Paul. He's first class for our level for sure. I don't know about his vocal side and organising the team, but he is a quality player. And look, I absolutely agree with you, James. And here's an interesting point, Stel. If you look last season, we didn't get out of the playoffs, and as a result of that, our head coach went 2 divisions higher to Forest Green Rovers. Don't blame him. You take what you can in this game, and that is a massive move up for him. The set piece coach, Alex Clapham, gets a move 4 divisions up into the Premier League with Southampton. Kel Roberts gets a move, I don't know, you'd certainly say it's 3 divisions higher if you put the Scottish Premiership on a par with the Championship, to Aberdeen. We're doing our best to hold on to Ruben Rodriguez. But I think it's no secret that clearly he could play a good couple of divisions higher, and the club have turned down cash bids. And it's a case now of do not see it all the way through the season, with another season of Ruben playing, holding on to him, but then losing his total value in the transfer market. And I think the point here is that we're having a lot of players. It's one thing to be linked still, and coaches. It's another to actually get a move, because agents are agents, and it's their job to percolate in the marketplace. What's your view on that? How does that affect other players? You know, Matty Palmer, Burton reportedly interested in him. If other players see the head coach go, players who would be close with Kel see Kel go, and make and obviously Kyle Wotton, who ironically enough only made 1 division higher, having been a fulcrum of our strike force for 3 seasons, but nevertheless, it's a much bigger cachet football league to National League. What goes through the minds of players that are staying? Point 1, and point 2, with that kind of quality that we have on an individual basis, should we be doing more than we are? Is playoffs the bare minimum that we should be achieving?
Well, yeah, playoffs is the bare minimum. Of course, anything less than the playoffs wouldn't be acceptable. Nobody could sort of defend that as anything like a decent season. That's not the objective at all. What goes through a player's mind should be nothing more at the start of every season than, I'm going to get the starting shirt, I'm going to show people what I'm about, and I'm going to be the main player. That there should be nothing more or less than that. Obviously, there's the human element of it. If you've got a manager that picked you week in, week out, and obviously liked you, and you got on well with, played a style that suited your game, he goes, somebody else comes in. There's a little bit of, there can be apprehension as to, right, does this guy, is he going to fancy me? Is he going to want to do something different or whatever? But the bottom line is, you still got to go out there and perform and show him that you're still the number 1 striker, defender, midfield player, that you can do what he wants. And if you do notice a perceived change in the style of play that the manager wants, or the role, a difference in the role that he wants from you, then that's down to a player's adaptability, which is part of the skill set of being a professional footballer. Because I doubt there's ever been a player who's, certainly not in the last 40, 50 years, that's ever gone through a career playing for one manager, outside of probably some of the Man U boys for Ferguson. So you've got to be adaptable. You have to adapt and move with the times throughout your career. As much as you might think, well, that's a bad thing. Let's say Cairo Mitchell might look at it, as a clean slate, and a few players who didn't play regularly look at it, right, fresh start, clean slate, chance to show what I'm about. New players that come in, they've obviously been shown faith by the club, by the head coach, that they've been brought in, been identified and wanted to be brought in. So there's a fillip for them to start with. And the players that are already there, so you've got to show that hunger and desire to get in the team and perform your role well enough. So the professionalism of a player is always, you're always going to have changes. Every dressing room, every team in every division has a turnover of players, not necessarily managers, but it's almost yearly with managers for half of the division, isn't it? The manager that starts off for half the teams in the division will be gone by the end of the season, usually there or thereabouts. So players are professional like that usually, in that, look, it might not be what you would have liked, or you might be absolutely loving the fact that a manager's gone, but you have to get on with it, and it ultimately comes down to your performance, what you can do, what you can show any manager. And again, I say, no matter whether you're liked or not liked by him, no manager picks a team that he doesn't think is his best chance of winning the game in front of them.
We'll wrap up in a moment, because obviously we've got to trek up to Gateshead and we're going to get soaked tomorrow. I think it's too early to say how much playing style has changed under Luke compared to the previous head coach. There clearly will be some differences, but the overarching philosophy, if you like, of the owners seems to be carrying on broadly the same. And we've spoken about this. I don't want to overanalyze. Where there is a difference, I think that Luke is a little more transparent, a little more direct in his appraisal of games. And a lot of fans say, "Oh, that's great. He said we weren't at it there and we didn't do this." Do you have any views, thoughts on that? And I guess we've also hinted privately, haven't we, that you have to be careful as a manager or as a head coach these days, because a lot of people say, "Oh, Ian covered up for this, covered up for that. He's watching a different game." But managers kind of have to do that because they have to go back to them players again. They can't throw those 22 players out the door and bring in another 22. They're going back to the same players. So there's always a kind of a balancing act, isn't it, in the way a manager appraises the performance of his players.
Yeah, of course. And, particularly when you're first in the door, you've got to set your standards, set your style, get your personality across, and let the players know where they stand. That's what pre-season's all about. But then the real competitive games come. And then we were speaking just before, what I liked about Luke Williams' post-match interview after Saturday was he wasn't doing what a lot of managers do nowadays, which is immediately looking for the positives. He was initially frustrated and seemed slightly annoyed the fact that they'd only got a point at Boreham Wood. And I like that. Now, again, I'm talking with my old decrepit head on from, footballer from 20 years ago, where, he's setting the standards and maybe marking territory early on. But let's be right. The reason Notts have only been in the playoffs the last 3 years and not been, banging away for that top spot is there's been too many drop points along the way. Too many daft games where we've only got a point where we should have had all three. And I think that was his frustration on Saturday, that they controlled the game, got their noses in front, got the lead early on, and should have continued to control the game and put Boreham Wood, to the sword, put them out of sight. And they didn't. And then a bit of chaos, and it sort of, I wouldn't say it didn't fall apart, but they just went away from what they've been doing so well and allowed Boreham Wood back into it. Then go and get your nose in front again in the second half, where it was more of an even contest. And Boreham Wood get an equaliser. And the frustration is that we could have been sat here now with 6 points, and he will know that
2 points clear at the top psychologically. 2 points.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm never going to look at a table for 10, 12 games, whatever. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is he's laying down a marker to the players that if you do drop points where you're on top, look, we might be terrible in a game and scrape a point, scrape a draw and go, do you know what? You'd be chuffed with that because we were rubbish, but we've got a point. We've showed some battling quality. Fair enough. Saturday wasn't necessarily that sort of performance. It was a dominant performance to start with, where we haven't got. So we've dropped points we should have had, really, and that will be his frustration. And again, it's only the second league game, but he wants to lay down the marker that if he comes out and sort of says, well, we were all right. Well, yeah, we played some nice football. Yeah, we did, which we did. But ultimately, we've come away with a point from when we've played arguably a bit better than that deserved. So it's telling the players, don't think that this happening regularly will be acceptable. So I quite like that interview. I take the point you're making, Paul, and I agree with it, that if that's the same week in, week out, then eventually players will switch off to it and become immune to it. But again, that's the man management side of being a head coach, manager, whatever we call them. You've got a group of players all with different personalities. And I think universally we would say that Notts County have got a good dressing room with good mentalities in there. So I think they will take the manager setting standards, pushing standards, sort of saying to them, look, a point at Boreham Wood, nobody would come away from that and go, well, do you know what, before it, we'd have probably took a point, depending on how the game goes. Not what we wanted, but we're coming away going, we are frustrated. And I'm letting the players know and the fans know that we're frustrated because when we play well, we expect to beat teams. And if the game gets a bit chaotic and other teams have moments, which they're going to do, we're also good enough to stand up to that. And there's a bit of frustration, but again, maybe just marking territory, just letting players know, and that will drive players on in future. And like I say, as long as that doesn't become every single game the same thing, I was pleased to see that, because that has been one of Notts' problems over certainly the last 3 years. All football clubs have it. You drop points, you're going to do that. No football team wins every game, of course, and you have games where you play really well and don't win for whatever reason. But it's been too often for Notts, and it could be the difference between the playoffs and that automatic place.
James Moore writes, I'm pleased with Luke so far. I think Ian Birchinall and Neil Ardley were very similar, nice guy managers. Luke seems to have a harder side to him, which is what we've needed for a while. Chris Gosling, I like Luke's expectation for performance. We have a lot of good players on the sidelines. I don't think there's any harm in pointing out where we have come up short. Dylan Room, we've only lost one game under Luke, and that was in one of the two 70-minute matches against Cambridge United. Chris Gosling points out we're unbeaten over 90-minute games. James Moore adds, we've been crying out for more ruthlessness. Fingers crossed we've found it in Luke Williams, and we've all got something crossed for that. So we shall wrap up now. Busy day tomorrow. I shall be heading up on the train from Newark in the afternoon. Travel Lodge just south of the station. Metro journey into the station just outside the stadium. I'll have him people don't call them cagoules anymore, do they? You always used to take a pack-a-mac to school, a cagoule. You'd wrap up. Do you remember them? And then like a waterproof little nylon top. I think they may be the order of the day tomorrow. Stel, you going up with Charlie tomorrow, yeah?
No, I'm going up. I'm actually golfing. I've got a bit of a stay up there. I'm golfing at Slaley Hall tomorrow. We're turning it into, well, I say it's a bit of a job, but then we've got business up in Newcastle on Wednesday, so I'm stopping over myself as well after the game. So Charlie's got to come back, so he's going up separately, and I'm making a couple of days of it. But yeah, a bit of pleasure and a bit of business.
Hall, that's a bit posh, that course for you, isn't it?
Well, it will be till I play it. There'll be divots everywhere.
Well, if you can take a divot, I tell you, in the current climate, you're doing well, by the way.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Alex Young says, who's coming down from Glasgow, I believe. See you at the Travel Lodge, Paul. James Moore, don't forget to sign the petition. It sounds like
I might need someone to send me the link.
Don't forget to sign the petition. Ian Birchinall, safe trip, all those making the journey, and see you there. By the way, back at work 7:30 next morning unlike lightweight, Paul, you better. Well, when you're chairman of your company, you set your own hours. And the reason I wasn't at the opening game of the season, I've just done 11 days for Major League Soccer. I'll drop a few names in now, Stel. I went to the most expensive sports stadium in the world, the SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, $5 billion. Okay? $5 billion. It's pretty impressive, I can assure you. Hey, to be fair, as it should be. as it should be.
I was going to say, yeah, it makes Wembley look cheap.
Yeah, and then I was at MLS All-Star Week, which is where they were playing the Liga MX All-Star team. And funny story, wherever I go, I tell everyone about Notts County, and I tell them about, because I hope to meet some very rich American while I'm over there that will, put a few quid in and do a Ryan Reynolds. And I got out at LA Airport, and there's this big, huge, everything's big in America, electronic board. And do you know what was on it? What it was promoting? This is Hollywood land, LA. The new Wrexham series with Reynolds and McElhenney. Huge board. I've just come out in the Uber from LAX airport. Wrexham. I thought, hang on a minute, where am I?
Cure for insomnia underneath it. Was that the tagline?
Yeah, it's actually got quite, because a lot of people did know Wrexham, because when I was telling them, boring them to death with Notts County, they all go, oh yeah, Wrexham are in the same division, aren't they? I said, yeah. And I saw Chikorito as well, and he was yagging on when I said Nottingham, and before I could say Notts County, you must support Nottingham Forest. I said, I support the #1 team in Nottingham. I said, you've probably never heard of him. Yes, you have. Yes, I have, he says in his Mexican accent, which I'm not going to emulate. It goes, Notts County, the oldest football team in the world. There you go. I thought, well done, Chikorito. Well done, Chikorito. He goes up in my estimation now. Anyway, right, that's bored you all to tears, hasn't it? So whoever's going up tomorrow, have a safe journey. Stel, thank you ever so much indeed.
Pleasure.
Enjoy Slaley Hall. Yeah.
I will.
You'll be shooting sub-80, won't you? The ball will be rolling miles tomorrow.
Yeah, and I don't know what the back nine I'll be doing, but yeah, sub-80 for the first 9 should be good.
Very good indeed, Stel. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. We'll be back. I think it's Thursday night. We're going to do a show ahead of Chesterfield, and hopefully we will have 3 more points, and hopefully we'll have scored enough goals, or more than everybody else, to still be top. It doesn't matter till 10 games, says Stel, but it would be nice to be going into that Chesterfield game at home, psychologically still top of the pile. Thank you for listening and watching. We will catch up again very soon. Bye for now.
Cheers.